Hello and welcome. First, I would like to thank Vera for inviting me to contribute to this online course. My name is Miro. I'm an architect and a researcher at the Chair for Digital Architectonics in ETH, Zurich. Today, I would like to talk to you about Vitruvius's 10 books on architecture, and its travels through time and different conceptual galaxies. So what I find beautiful with Vitruvius's books is that there are books which don't have an original version, so only translations of translations, and there are many of them. Somehow still it's commonly said that this book marks the origin of architecture, or at least that it's the first preserved book on architecture. What I find beautiful about it is that it travels through time, and through its translations and comments, it builds up a character. It matures, it starts to speak in many languages, begins to think with words that didn't exist in time of Vitruvius. So I want to think of this process as something that constitutes and enriches Vitruvius, and not as something which makes it less consistent and stable. I think that with every translation, Vitruvius becomes more rich and sophisticated. So in this sense, I think of this book as an open invariant. So this book is an open invariant. It changes, but it stays the same. Like the way plants or humans grow and think. So I am the same person I was 20 years ago, but I'm a completely different one at the same time. So I would like to invite you to think of books and concepts in this manner. And with this in mind, then let's join Vitruvius on his adventures. So Vitruvius is on a travel through temporal and conceptual galaxies. And to be able to travel with Vitruvius, let me set the stage and an atmosphere. I would like to start the setting of the stage and an atmosphere with a poem on architecture. And this poem has the same title as the talk, an open invariant. Nothing has ever been invented by one man in architecture. Architecture is stifled by custom. Architecture is a plastic thing. Architecture is a thing of art, a phenomena of the emotions. Architecture is a matter of harmonies. It is a pure creation of the spirit. Architecture is a very noble art. Architecture is governed by standards. Architecture is stifled by custom. The styles are a lie. Architecture is very broad. Architecture is nothing but order, arrangement, noble prisms seen in light. Architecture is based on axis. Architecture is plastic, not a romantic affair. Architecture is very, very able to express itself in a precise fashion. Architecture is plastic thing. Architecture is stifled by custom. But wait a little. Architecture is not only a question of arrangement. Writing on architecture is not like history or poetry. For this book does not show of what architecture is composed, but treats of the origin of the building art and how it was fostered and how it made progress step by step until it reached its present perfection. I would like to emphasize above all that architecture is a game lacking clear rules. Architecture is at one and the same time science and art, but all the possible alternatives are not in fact realized. There are not good many partial groups, regional compatibilities and coherent architectures that might have emerged yet did not do so. And architecture too has this mysterious dimension of the frontier between two worlds of space. Architecture positions its ensembles, houses, towns or cities, monuments or factories to function like faces in a landscape they transform. The house stares through its windows at the vineyards and tufts of time. Ornamental oranges take shape on its walls, a tissue of lice, oranges, and lemons. The philosopher forgets that the house built around him transforms a plantation of olive trees into a Max Ernst painting. The architect has forgotten this too, and is happy if the next harvest outside is transformed into a virgin with grapes inside. The house transforms the given, which can assault us, softening it into icons. It is a box for generating images, a cavern or eye or camera obscura, a barn which sunlight only illuminates with a slim shaft piercing through the dust, an ear. Architecture produces painting as though the fresco or canvas hanging on the wall revealed the ultimate cause of the whole structure. The aim of architecture is painting or tapestry. What we took to be mere ornament is its objective, or at least very last. or at the very least, its end product. Walls are paintings, walls are for paintings, windows for pictures, and padded doors for intimate conversations. I now held in my hands a vast systematic fragment of the entire history of an unknown planet, with its architectures and its playing cards, the horror of its mythologies and the murmur of its tongues, its emperors and its seas, its minerals and its birds, its fishes and its algebra and its fire, its theological and metaphysical controversies, all joined, articulated, coherent, and with no visible doctrinal purpose or hint of parody. Beyond this stage of perfection in architecture, natural selection could not lead. For the comb of the hive bee, as far as we can see, is absolutely perfect in economizing wax. For architecture, among all the arts, it is the one that most boldly tries to reproduce in its rhythm the order of the universe, which the ancient called cosmos, that is to say ornate, since it is like a great animal on whom there shine the perfection and the proportion of all its members. So this poem talks about architecture, I would say, in a similar manner like Vitruvius talks about it. It comes from the plenty. So it's a collection of voices talking about architecture. It's me talking about architecture. I'm talking in terms of these voices. So I'm writing this poem with Corbusier, Rogers, Vitruvius, Durand, Foucault, Deleuze, McLuhan, Sayre, Borges, Darwin, Eco. It's fantastic, to talk to all of them at once. And it doesn't matter that their sentences are out of context. They're in another context. And I call this other context Xenotech. So Xenotech is a library, and as its name suggests, it likes strangers. And all the strangers are welcome if they talk about things that they care. So we have more than 1,000 different books in this library, and they are all on one click away. Of course, it's a curated library. It's curated by me, by our architectural department, by Ludger, Vera, Martin, that we collaborate with. Yeah, so it's a database and it's a library. And inside this library, books and concepts become alive and open, or at least I want to think of them in this way. They start to tell more than it was imagined in the books by their authors. But of course, it's not only the library. To start talking to the whole library, or some of its shelves, and not only to single books, I created an avatar, a search engine, machine intelligence, an instrument, and I named it Alice CH3 and 81. So if we relate Xenotech, which is a kind of a database, a library, with the Ask Alice instrument, with the search engine, books and concepts, they become alive, they start to live in this new synthetic life. They travel, hang out with each other, and we can start asking questions. So let's ask Xenotech. Let's start a conversation about columns, and we want to talk about Vitruvius. And let's search. What we get, Alice answers us with more than 7,000 results. And this is the context in which I want to talk about Vitruvius's 10 books. So when I use machine intelligence with Xenotech library, it forms a kind of a galaxy of concepts, which is unique for this library. And in this galaxy of concepts that like each other, or indexes that like each other, they come together. So for instance, if we have this summer here, and I want to get an idea of what this summer is about, I should look around and see at the other concepts or the other indexes what they are about to get an idea. So it's about the tree, the lake, the orange, the flower, the plant, the entrance, accommodation, bedroom, directness, and so on. So this summer is not a summer of the global warming. Yeah, it's a different summer. And if we have books in this galaxy, then each book throws a light or shines in a different way in the galaxy. And you can see that it's the same galaxy, but it shines in a different way. And then this would be the concepts that, for instance, Vitruvius or Barbaros Vitruvius is interested in. So it's the part, the column, the temple, the height, and so on. If we change the library, Vitruvius goes to another library, it will shine in a different way. What I find particularly interesting with Vitruvius is that there is no single version of Vitruvius. So in our library in Xenotech, we have 4 different ones. And look at how great the first one is. So it's Vitruvius, his translation, who was translated by Barbaro in 1567 and then retranslated by Williams in 2019. So it's the first, kind of a translation and very literally here. And all these translations of Vitruvius, they come, as many other ancient texts, they were preserved in the Middle Ages from one of the famous libraries of the Charles the Great from the 9th century. So then we have this 9th century translation of the lost original from the 2nd century, and this is the oldest version of the lost origin of architecture. So I love this kind of game. And here all these translations are different. Yeah? Then we have the abridgment of architecture from a kind of classical era. We have 2 20th century translations. Let's look at them in detail just to see what kind of books they are. It's very funny to see. If we are with Barbaro's translation of Vitruv, if we just go a little bit down. For instance here. So look at this. We have one sentence of Vitruv, and then we have the commentary of Barbaro. Page. Another sentence of Vitruv, a page of Barbaro. Another sentence of Vitruv, a page of Barbaro. So Barbaro is really trying to reinvent what Vitruvius is saying. It's a very, very interesting, I would say almost a contemporary gesture, how Barbaro discusses what Vitruvius is doing. The second version is the Perrot's abridgment of architecture. And look at this now. It's the same gesture in an inverted manner. Yeah? So it's a Baroque or classical version, and it's the abridgment, so it's the compact, the pocket version of Vitruvius. So he's making it compact and super precise. What's interesting is that both of these versions are trying to rewrite Vitruvius. So they translate it and they use it to rethink what their time is about, rather than to understand of what Vitruvius really wanted. Yeah? So with the abridgment, there is no more quotes from Vitruvius. It's really a new language that Perrot is inventing for himself to talk about contemporary architecture. And this is quite different from the 20th century translations, which try to faithfully translate the text word by word, and then carefully putting the commentary or the introduction in the beginning of the book, and make a clear distance from translation, translator's note, and what the book is about. So these two are very similar. You can check them alone. So all these gestures, they work in an interesting way. I think they contribute to the idea of an open invariant in Vitruvius's 10 books. So let's now try to take a look how these different Vitruviuses behave when they travel and come to a synthetic context like Xenotech. So when these books enter this huge library of Xenotech, I mean huge, 700, 800 books, how they behave is, what happens is that they stick together somehow. They're close to each other, they deal with similar concepts, they shine in a similar way. These are the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we look at them here in a little bit magnified version, we can see that the glows, the brown part and the white parts are the things they care about. They glow at the same space. If we look at this now here in detail, you can see how in principle they glow at the same place, which is quite different if they decide to travel to another place, to a small house, I would say to a small house of their own. If these 4 books are in a small house of their own, look at this, then it's a new galaxy of concepts, and in it, each of them is positioned in a specific part. Now let's try to look at this in detail. 1, 2, 3, 4. So look, a different galaxy of concepts, and they put their focus in different places. So for instance, if we are with Barbaro, Vitruvius of Barbaro, what he is interested in, and try to feel the words a little bit about the projection, the perspective, the ratio, parallel, harmony, geometry, Pythagoras, compass, square, projection, idea, plan, beauty, order, mechanics, magnitude, proportion. So he is somewhere around perspective. If we go the perspective in a different sense, then for instance this guy is, so this is Perrault. Look at his perspective. So it's about the portion, partition, sorting, signifying, justice, model, abacus, magnitude, principle, proportion, machine, mechanical, cornice, capital, and so on. So he is about organizing and sorting things done with the perspective, while Barbaro is about the perspective. And then the 20th century, of course, these interpretations are very subjective, so one should kind of look at this and try to think, this is kind of my version of what I see here. I think that's very important. So with the 20th century translations, before and after the World War, we have just a slight flavor change, but a radical change from the guys. And look at the words that Vitruvius is now using. Style, he's using style, method, nation, business, fly, engine, picture, arrangement, construct, calculation. Or with a contemporary one from 1999, from 20 years ago, he's with a type. He's talking about type, about floating, about fashion, development, design, principle, system, flow. I mean, not only about these things, but these things are used in the translation. And if we put them now like this here, I just took them out so it can be a more clear, or it's a kind of an evidence, I don't know. Yeah? These are indexes to Vitruvius and to different flavors and faces of Vitruvius. And if we now want to go in detail, let's take a few sentences in Latin and look at them. And what I find particularly interesting is to focus on his concepts of ichnographia, orthographia, and scenographia, because they are usually translated as ground plan, elevation, and perspective. But perspective was not there when Vitruvius was writing his book. So then I wanted to focus exactly on this point and see how this works with different translations. And this is kind of very, very beautiful to look. I mean, it's nothing new, but it's kind of interesting. So of course, with Barbaro, we have the plan, the elevation, and then we don't have the perspective, but the profile. So that's interesting. Later we'll see what happens. And of course, his commentary on this. The other guys, like with Perrault, it's so clear. It's the first iconography, which is geometrical plan. Second is the octography, which is the geometrical elevation. And third is scenography, which is perspective elevation. Great. Then before the World War, we have ground plan, elevation, and perspective, also quite clear. And then look at the change of flavor in the contemporary translation, which says iconography, plan. So it puts both terms together, orthography, elevation, and then scenography. Okay, what this is, we don't know. So I did this for the other sentences, but maybe it's too long to go with all of this. Let's go to, of course, to perspective. And now look at this. With Barbaro, the profile is the outline of the front and the sides as they move away, a convergence of all the lines at the center of the compass. So this is the profile, which Vitruvius calls scenographia. And then he says, the third idea is the profile called sciographia. Sciographia, which is again a different word than scenographia. So for him to talk about Vitruvius' scenographia, he invented two words. And then he says, the usefulness of the profile moves me to interpret Vitruvius' text as sciographia and not scenographia, because even though scenographia is the description of the scena and the perspective, and it's necessary in things of the theater, as will be seen in the 5th book, it doesn't appear that it's related to the ideas of disposition of which we are speaking here. So it's not this disposition, it's a different one. And the one who carefully considers, it is evident because all the lines comes to the eye unimpeded, and the projections and retractions and the sizes are known as they are, not as they appear, with the proportionate lines and angles, as is done in the perspective. Even though it appears that the definition of sciographia adopted by Vitruvius mentions the definition of perspective. It doesn't matter. What is so beautiful here is how he's playing and trying to reinvent the scenography and then put it in his contemporary way to talk about perspective. For Perrault, this is completely irrelevant for him. Already here it was clear what's going on, because it's the short version. And then just this one is interesting to see how they translate cogitatio. Yeah? So with the Barbaro, it's a thought, and with the 20th century guys, it's the reflection and analysis. So here it's more on the projection side, and here it's more on the reflection side. And now what would be interesting in a sense of picking up on Barbaro and letting these concepts unfold even more, I would say to go to Xenotech and ask the same questions again. So let's ask Alice to unfold us these questions. So let's go to this interesting library with Foucault, Deleuze, and Derrida, and let's talk directly about, so we'll not talk about perspective now, we will talk about ichnographia. Ichnographia, and see what Xenotech can tell us. So 56 results. This is fine. Iconography therefore signifies the writing of the trace. Time unfolds the iconography across the infinite series of scenographies, and so on. And look at here. Iconography contains the possible, and now decipher that iconography. In the beginning is the iconography, the black box is the iconography itself. The book of foundation is the first of all iconographical. He takes on every value, he bears the entire iconography of values. Jupiter is the geometral of substitutions. He is the iconography of the monstrous, and so on. So we can do the same with orthography and scenography, and in this manner of Barbaro, how he was commenting on Vitruvius, so we can unfold more and more from Xenotech, and like Barbaro, in this gesture, update and articulate a new contemporary face of what Vitruvius might be for us. I think this would be a very interesting gesture to do. I think this is all I wanted to talk about. Hope this will create or trigger interesting discussions. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.